Yeah. I think that what I think is so cool about what ISF is doing is that I'm out there speaking for a kid that I don't even know. And I think that that's different, right? When you're out there raising money and being like, "Give money to help save my kid." My door is closed. So now we're out there raising money for kids who haven't even been diagnosed yet. So I think that that is what I love about our organization is that, you know, it's not about saving a person, it's about saving a generation of kids that are coming up, and that makes it what's even more special.
Welcome to another episode of Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop, co-founder of Social Driver. Let's face it, Washington is the center of influence in the US and arguably in the world. Chief Influencer features leaders who have figured out how to break through in today's fragmented and fast-changing environment. Social Driver teamed up with the Communications Board and the George Washington University College of Professional Studies to recognize these incredible leaders as chief influencers and highlight how they inspire and influence others. Well, I am thrilled to introduce today's guest, Erin Santos Primis, the founder and executive director of the Isabella Santos Foundation. It's a nonprofit she founded to change the future for kids with rare pediatric cancers. Now, before we dive in, here are a few things I think you should know about today's guest. Number one, Erin transformed unimaginable loss into a lasting impact. After her daughter, Isabella, was diagnosed with neuroblastoma in 2007, Erin launched ISF with a $7,000 fundraiser. Following Isabella's passing in 2012, she led the organization to raise more than $18 million, supporting programs like the Rare and Solid Tumor Program and the $5 million Global Rare Pediatric Cancer Program at Levine Children's Hospital, the hospital's largest ever philanthropic commitment. Number two, she leads with heart and a bold strategic vision. Erin heads a powerhouse team of 8 women, cultivates mission-driven partnerships, and she's uniting children's hospitals across the Carolinas to accelerate cures for rare cancers. And number three, she inspires beyond ISF. A passionate advocate for living with purpose and joy, Erin contributes her time to Make-A-Wish, Ronald McDonald House, and the Community Blood Center of the Carolinas. Erin, you've been called a visionary leader, a relentless fundraiser, and a national humanitarian, recognized with the Larry Frederick Award and named Humanitarian of the Year. And you've also, of course, been called a chief executive of this foundation. So today, we're thrilled to call you Chief Influencer. Welcome.
Thank you. What an intro. I love that.
Well, it was really fun to get to know you a little bit through this process and learn about you. And, as you know, we have featured a number of patient advocacy leaders from different backgrounds. Some of them lead these giant name brands. And I'm just so inspired by what you've built and what you're continuing to do. And I want to just ask if we could start at the beginning. ISF started as a $7,000 fundraiser, and it was during your daughter's treatment. I wonder if you could tell us how that first act of hope shaped the way that the foundation operated then and operates today.
Sure. So when Isabella was diagnosed in 2007 at the age of 2.5, we had a family friend come to us and say, "Hey, I'd love to put on a 5K here in your local Charlotte community to have everyone kind of come out and support you guys." So we decided to say yes. We came out. We had about 150 people that came out. We raised $7,000, but the best part about it was that Isabella and my son Grant at the time, who was maybe a year and a half, they couldn't believe that everyone was doing this for her. So I think, she came out in her princess dress and ran in quotation marks, a 5K. But I think it was the first time that people were really getting to meet her and seeing that outside of having a bald head, she was the most energetic little girl on the planet. So like I said, in a little princess dress, running around, blowing kisses at everybody and hugging everyone. And it was just, she was so magnetic that people just fell in love with her. And, the following years that we continued to do this, it grew and grew to where other little kids that we knew in the hospital would come out. So Isabella kind of felt like it was kind of like a party for her and her friends. She never really grasped what we were actually trying to do. It was more about helping her friends and coming out and thanking people for coming. And it was just so pure and genuine that it just took off from there. So it was all her.
Lots of princess dresses probably
Yes.
showing up in subsequent years.
Yes.
When you did that first one, I mean, you had no idea where this would go, how large this organization would get. I mean, you probably just thought, this is amazing. We raised $7,000, not knowing that, millions were to follow. Did you foresee that this would pick up steam like it has?
Never. Absolutely not. We were so surprised the first year. We thought we were such big stuff raising $7,000, and to come back the following year and raise 14 and then 56,000, and every year we kept thinking, she had a 40% survivor rate and she relapsed 5 times. So without fail, I feel like she would relapse every August, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this race is coming up in September. What are we going to do?" And somehow she would
Mm,
pull herself out of bed through chemotherapy and show up on that line again every year.
wow.
And the chance of survival after relapse is 0, and we kept thinking, "This is going to end horribly." And then the next year, there she was again, and I'm like, "This is crazy." So, the fact that she survived 5 years and even that last year came out, and never looked good. I always felt like the fact that she's out here feels so unsafe to me, but she did everything she could to come out there, so it just kept growing, and the support for her and the love for her was just it was incredible each year. By the time that she passed away, I mean, there were just thousands of people out there. It was nuts.
It's amazing. And I think so many people are inspired by how you and your family just took a struggle and
Mhm.
grief and turned that into purpose. And I know one of the things you mentioned to me, and I want to make sure I get this right, is that you've really kept Isabella's story central in the work of ISF.
Mhm.
Obviously, her name is part of it, but not have that define everything that the organization does. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think the first 5 years, because she was there, she was the center, and I think that she loved that part of it, as I said, for her and her little buddies from the hospital. But and, you know, the way that it goes is after she passes away, I think our family becomes the center where, my other 2 children and myself and my husband at the time, I think people just felt so unbelievably terrible for us that we moved into the centerpiece, and I kind of became the mouthpiece of the organization. But then as you continue to grow, the next 2 years was really about kind of watching me and my grief and how I was dealing with it. But then, I have to think that I have 2 other children, and I was trying to be a little mindful of, they didn't ask for this, and, to
Yeah.
kind of share stories about what we're up to, and what my other children are up to. I kind of started to feel a little bit like it became an invasion of their privacy. So, and we were learning about all these other children that were going through things, and I kind of felt like, what is their story is not any different than mine. My child may be a little bit more charismatic about showing her support, but these kids deserve to be spotlighted as well. So we started to meet more and more kids that were going through it and sharing their stories, and I think their families were so appreciative that we were giving their child a centerpiece for a little bit to kind of share like what their child has been through. So it was so honorable to kind of pass the torch to some of these other families and kids for a while, but also allowed us to have a little bit of privacy too, to kind of like
Mm.
continue to figure out what we were going to do. Cause, I went through a divorce, and then that became something that was just hard to have public as well. So it kind of allowed us to pull back, and feature these other children, which also led to a change in the organization to not only support neuroblastoma, which is what Isabella had, but when we started to meet these other kids that have things like osteosarcoma or rhabdosarcoma, we realized that their stories were not any harder than ours. So why would we just focus on one? So that's when we really started to decide to expand our research and focus on all rare cancers. So it was a great learning experience to see that profiling these other children wasn't taking anything away from my daughter, and it wasn't about ego at all.
Yeah.
But it was such a great learning experience to be able to teach the community that, hey, there's other kids like Isabella that are going through this right now in our community, and they need your help as well. So what we do find though is that for some reason our family still ends up being the nucleus of this organization. So every once in a while we have to kind of come back in and kind of give an update of something from my point of view, or my son is highly involved in the organization. So whenever our family kind of resurfaces as the centerpiece, things really start to move again. And I think it's just
Yeah.
because people feel like they knew us. So many
Yeah.
people will come up to us that are strangers to us, but they know our entire life story. They know everything about what my kids are going through. They know the new guy I'm dating. I mean, it's just crazy how that we kind of became like this D-list celebrity in this area where people knew us and we didn't know them. And there were appropriate times to bring our family back in the circle, but we just felt like there's a time and place for that, and these other kids just deserve to be, a part of it too.
Well, we often say, in today's environment, faces are the new logos,
Yes.
right? And whether we're looking at TikTok or LinkedIn or, but, people really trust people and they
Mhm.
resonate with individuals rather than some formal press statement from a logo that you don't know who or what committee wrote that.
Yeah.
So it's not as a big surprise that you launching this and being at the center with your family, that folks resonated with you and your story and but one of the things I find really interesting about what you did, and I'm going to kind of bring this into a question about, what laid the foundation for your growth, is that you started, your daughter Isabella's story, your family, and you got over 100, and then you got more and more people to show up for this fundraiser. But when you were able to incorporate other kids who had different, cancers and their families, it allowed you to scale to reach more people than you could have reached on your own.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's one of the elements that you sort of included in the foundation of this organization that allowed it to grow.
Definitely, because I think that when a lot of these families are going through something, their first thought, which was ours, was to create a charity while we were going through it. And I don't know why in the world we decided to do that because that was absolutely insane to be doing that on top of Isabella's treatment. But I think we brought
Yeah.
some comfort to these families to know that, like, I can focus on what my daughter or son needs because what the Isabella Santos Foundation is doing in the background with our local hospital is helping. So I don't need to be the one out there doing it. So when these kids were diagnosed and people would always come to them and say, "How can I help?" The immediate thing was, look at this organization, read what this mom just said. This is exactly what we're going through and support it because they already have legs underneath them and they're moving. And it prevented these families from having to, juggle a couple things at the same time. So I think it allowed us to go into new communities where some of those patients were. But then I think the other piece of what happened was Isabella was the centerpiece for so long, and then going through the grief of it and what happens to a family after, I became I think that maybe I told it like it was a little bit more than your normal organization would.
Mhm.
It was very, uh, crass and real, and I think that with a lot of charities, you're so nervous to kinda tell the real truth about what's going on. So we were able to
Yeah.
kinda share these family stories, but then they were also getting my voice on top of it to kinda talk about, like, what this is really like, because I think that so many times you just see these cookie cutter, charities of what pediatric cancer looks like, and St. Jude's does an amazing job of it. But a lot of them look the same, and we kind of didn't. We tried to show these kids in a different light. We tried to show what I was going through in a different light, and it made it just a little bit more real to everybody, which is, I think, the combination of those things really drew people in.
I'm really glad you shared that. I think that is a lesson that so many people, whatever role they're in, can learn from. Um, you know, I was in a conversation recently where a former journalist was saying, look, when I was trained as a journalist, I was told to stay out of the story, to be this neutral outsider. And we had in the same room a young 25-year-old social media influencer who has millions of followers who said, well, the reason my followers want to listen to me and they trust me is that they have built a relationship with me, they believe me, and they don't think I'm just, some spokesperson for a company where, I don't really believe what I'm saying. And it kind of shows this evolution in trust. Who do people connect with? Who do people trust? And you said, you really made it real. Sometimes it was crass. Uh, Word that we hear a lot is authentic, right?
Yes.
Your communication was authentic. So it resonated with people. And I think it does feel like, well, it's easier to do that if you're with a smaller organization. But at the same time, what we're seeing is even, a CEO of a much larger organization, a big company, if they find the right way to show up authentically that connects with their audience, but that works for them, it resonates so much more with their people, their community, and it is, it strikes them as authentic. So I wonder if you could just share a little bit about that and your perspective on that, because
Yeah.
somebody who's a leader might be listening, and I think they could take away some of the lessons that you have.
Yeah. I think that's very true, and one of the themes of me is that I'm an Enneagram 8. So I don't know if you
Yeah.
are familiar with that, but that is a very strong and dominant personality. It can come off a little aggressive and intimidating, and I think that that's kind of how I handled this foundation. And our
Mhm.
target market is moms, and I think nowadays people are so afraid to say what's on their mind. And I look back of me getting up at a stage behind a podium and saying things that I'm like, "I cannot believe I said that to a public audience." But the women would come up to me afterwards and be like, "Yes, that is exactly how I would think. That's exactly what I would say." And I think that
What did you say?
just, I mean, you're furious. You're absolutely
Yeah.
furious at the end of it because you just think that, like, you think of all the money that's being spent and how no one's paying attention to this and no one cares because someone could be like, oh, my father had colon cancer or my mother had breast cancer, but it's so hard that you feel like you can't get someone to understand unless they've been in your shoes. So when people say, I understand cancer, I give to this organization or that organization, so little of that funding goes to a rare cancer space. And
Mhm.
it's so frustrating because we would be going through treatment and hearing about things coming down the pipe, and they just don't come down fast enough because doctors would always say, this isn't a science issue, it's a funding issue. So when you lose a daughter and you have to go through that process, and I always tell people watching a little 7-year-old girl die in your bed, like, come on, like, how is this happening? And how is this not the easiest thing to raise money for? And I mean, I was really upset that when people chose not to give. It was really hard for me. So I think that that was a little off-putting to people, but it got people behind me because I was like, imagine give as if this was your kid. Like, don't just give the $50 because you feel bad for me. Like, what if this was your kid? Like, this is unbelievable that this is going on and we can't get people to donate to it.
I mean, I guess part of what I'm hearing there, Erin, is that channeling your true emotions, which, may not be the emotions everybody feels comfortable with, but it's real. You're upset,
Mhm.
you're mad, and you're frustrated that resources from large organizations don't trickle down to these rare diseases. By using that, not everybody's gonna like it, but you
True.
really connected with some people, and it really had an impact on your ability to influence them. And what strikes me about what you've done, too many people, too many families go through terrible situations, right? Some of them say, I'm going to do something about it. And, maybe they organize a team at their, local fundraiser. Very few say, you know what, I'm going to build something and then actually follow through with it. And like you
Yeah.
said, a lot of people, they have the idea of, oh, I'm going to create my own foundation, but like you've done it. You've grown it from 7,000 to millions. And there's something special about that. There's something different about that, which you obviously know. And I'd love if you could just maybe talk a little bit about what that was that, you think made it possible to do that. But then I also would love for you to share about some of the bold new steps your organization has taken over the last year and a half and what has inspired that shift to
Mhm.
evolve.
Yeah. I think that what I think is so cool about what ISF is doing is that I'm out there speaking for a kid that I don't even know. And I think that that's different, right? When you're out there raising money and being like, "Give money to help save my kid." My door is closed. So now we're out there raising money for kids who haven't even been diagnosed yet. So I think that that is what I love about our organization is that, you know, it's not about saving a person, it's about saving a generation of kids that are coming up, and that makes it what's even more special. So, I do love that part about it, and the fact that we all get so feisty and fired up and excited to raise money for kids that are gonna be on a trial in Chapel Hill, and I don't even know anyone that lives in Chapel Hill. Like, that's what's really cool about us. There's no ego in this, it's just about a kid, and we don't care where they live. So, I think that that's a cool part of it. So, um But how we've gone about changing how we're fundraising, is that your question?
Yeah, I feel like you've adapted the way your partnerships and sort of, who you're raising, money for. You talked about expanding the different diseases. And so I
Yeah.
guess you have evolved to continue to stay relevant and
Mhm.
meet the moment. And I think it's really important for other founders to hear how you did that, because you have to change, and people don't necessarily like change and
Yeah.
changing directions. And so it's something that you've had to get comfortable with, and I'm sure get other people around you comfortable with and influence them to go along with you.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that for us, it's really, I hate to say that we're training our donors, but we really are. I think that what we're trying to do is so many people are so obsessed with their money staying in their local community, and we are a firm believer in that. But I think that for us, we're trying to teach our donors that that it's okay to raise money here and have it go 2 hours down the street. We can't assume that our local hospital can take care of everything. So I think we've done a really great job of training them to also have the belief that we don't care where the money goes as long as it's going to the best thing. So
Mhm.
I think we work really hard in our events to introduce them to new ideas and new doctors and new areas surrounding Charlotte that are important and are doing things that are making a difference. And I think that I'm pretty confident that usually what I tell someone is important, they believe me, because they know that we've done our research and they support it. So it feels like I'm like bullying people, but it's really just about guiding them and showing them like the importance of things,
Yeah.
and the importance of these kids that they don't even know. So it's been working.
I can imagine that one of the challenges that you run into as well, you said some people want their money to stay locally, is that if you think about something like cancer, people might say, oh, well, there's these other big nonprofits that already do that. Why create your own thing? Why not just raise money and give it to them? And I wonder if
Yeah.
you could just talk a little bit about, you must get that question a lot, and you must have thought about it, when you're
Hmm.
probably working really hard, think, yeah, I could just do
Yeah.
something different. Um, why do you think it's important to have organizations like yours to complement and
Yeah.
be a part of the ecosystem with those other larger brand names that we're familiar with?
Yeah, I often talk a lot, and I know you and I spoke previously about kind of being in the messy middle of a
Mhm.
charity. So we're not a grassroots organization that's working a bake sale and raising $5,000 anymore. We used to be there, but we're also not these organizations like the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, which are really like they're changing survivor rates because they're raising so much money because they're creating new drugs. But what happens is you find these charities that are raising between maybe 1 million and 5 million or 6, 7, $8 million that we're kind of filling these gaps of things that the smaller organizations don't have enough money to do, and the larger organizations are too focused on the large prize that they don't see that like a lot of these little steps have to be taken before it gets there. So I think for us, we fill a lot of these local community projects. Our local hospital, we are their largest funder in the rare pediatric cancer space. It is not a big box organization. So things that they need for family services, nutrition, mental health, additional employees, nurse navigators, all that type of stuff. We fill those as well. And oftentimes they have great ideas that may just be too small of an idea for these larger organizations. And a lot of times those are the things that generate into these larger organizations funding them. So I think that, if we continue to lose out because we aren't a big box organization, so I don't have the marketing budget that maybe a big box organization is. I mean, we're down here like working it with two marketing people and feel like we're doing great. So I think for us, it's so important for people to support these messy middle charities because we are kind of like filling the cracks of where institutions and research is not happening, especially with some of the changes in the new funding from the federal government. A lot of these places are losing so much funding that they're coming to us and being like, we have no idea how extremely important that you've become to us. Not that we weren't before, but now the need for private organizations like ours is so dramatically increased. So I just think it's so important to continue to look at these organizations that are community based and helping their local hospital and families. And that's what we're doing.
This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information. Yeah, the community aspect of what you're doing and building community locally is a really major differentiator, I guess I would say, for how you show up. And that those resources go into your local hospital. And I believe, you're one of the top funders, if I'm not mistaken, right?
We are. We are. But sometimes you wouldn't know that because we're not a local celebrity. So we're just a bunch of moms, sitting around a dining room table. So I think that's even the cooler story is that
Mhm.
I'm not shooting hoops or throwing passes. I'm just a mom and I'm still raising more money and contributing more than maybe somebody else is. So I think that's the better story.
And we wouldn't always know that, that funding would come through a local organization like yours, because you might think it's some national foundation or
Yeah,
some giant
definitely.
company that has an office there. And I think it really showcases the power of community.
Hmm.
And, we loved featuring Dr. Kolb from the Leukemia Lymphoma Society and hearing about the great work that they're
Yeah.
doing. But I imagine he would also agree it takes this entire ecosystem of communities. And a few things I'd like to just kind of threads to pull through, since we've had some other episodes that have intersected with this. We just heard from Anna Palmer, who founded Punchbowl News, that, when they created that news organization, which is highly successful, they said, we don't want to just build an audience. We want to build a community. And I think we're increasingly hearing that if you want to truly influence the people who can make a difference, influence institutions and systems and make change in the world, it's about building community. That's what resonates. And so folks that, aren't from your part of the country, don't have a connection necessarily to rare diseases, I think there's a lot that they can take away from what you're sharing with us about the power of community. And it also goes back to what we talked about earlier around trust. People trust people who have close proximity to them, who have
Yeah.
similar experiences to them. You're able to build community in a way locally through your credibility and the just sheer work that you've done and the people you brought together, that just other organizations just couldn't come in from out of nowhere and do that. And it lets you marshal these resources to become, the top funder for your local hospital. I think it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I look at our donor base and every name that comes across, I know them. I know who they are. I know where their kids go to school. I know and they know me. I mean, I invited them, a lot of them, to my wedding. I mean, these donors of ours have become like a community tribe and a family of ours. Like we know people, everyone by name, and someday we'll get to the point where we don't. But right now, every single donor, someone sitting at this table knows them and knows their story, and I love that. I think donors want to be known, wanna feel like they're part of our
Mhm.
community, and that's how we do it.
In terms of how you just show up, I know one of the things that you've tried to do when you think about being authentic in your communication is to avoid the familiar tropes of pediatric fundraising. And I wonder if you
Mhm.
could talk about what's guided your decision to take a different path and how that's paid off.
Yeah, I think for us, two things. One, to piggyback on what I just mentioned, we have a giving society called our Three Wish Society, that are donors that give $2,500 or more, and we do events with them throughout the year. And as I mentioned, we really make these donors feel special. They're the backbone of our charity. So I think that that's one way, is just having really individualized relationships with some of our donors. So that would be one. But I think that, the majority of charities, they do their 5Ks and golf tournaments and galas, and we do those, and they do really well because I think that they become signature events that you're known for, and it gives our board members an ability to kind of bring their people out and to an event that they feel very familiar with. But what I'm finding, and interestingly enough, after 18 years, that I want to like completely take everything we do and flip it upside down. Um, but we have decided to start doing events where we're almost masking the event, as a fun event, and you may not even know that our charity is putting it on. So I just think that we're just so flooded with the same types of charity events, month after month, that they all start to feel the same. So this last year, I kind of came up with an idea to do something dramatically different and disguise the organization underneath, kind of an event that's kind of made for women here in Charlotte. So we have decided to partner with some of the stars from Bravo's Southern Charm. So it's a reality show that's based here in Charleston that has quite a following with women my age, maybe in their 40s. We've asked them to come here and kind of do a mini BravoCon here in Charlotte, which is just like a little meet and greet with the guys and talk about the show and do something fun. And for women, yes, we have like the Panthers and the Hornets and stuff, but that's not really, you want it something like for a girls' night out, and you don't want to do a gala. So we kind of packaged up this whole event around kind of some celebrities here in the Southeast, and it has taken off like wildfire. And we
Nice.
have a huge, sponsors and a wait list of people, and people are coming and they have no idea that it is for the Isabella Santos Foundation. Now, I'm going to give them a big surprise when they get there of what they're going to be helping to fund. But I love the idea of kind of like masking your charity in something that feels different. So everyone always says with charities, the hardest part is you constantly have to reinvent yourself. So how are you going to do your gala different? How are you going to do your golf tournament different? And I'm like, get rid of all of that. Like, find other ways to get your name out into the community and do something that raises a ton of money. And people don't realize it until they get there. Like, it's such a great new thing that we've seen. And in 18 years, we haven't gotten this much buzz on an event in the life of the Isabella Santos Foundation. And it was just an idea that I had and kind of slid into the DMs of some of these guys and pitched this idea, and they said yes. And I'm like, well, here we go. So this whole event started, and it may be the biggest event we've ever had
Wow.
financially. So who knew?
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
And when I think about, okay, what's the sort of strategic lesson there? A lot of this whole gala overwhelm that people have when there's so many of them, it really starts with the organization's brand at the center. And then it's like, okay, how to get people to get there and support me? And it sounds like you thought about, look, who's my target audience? What would be fun and exciting for them? What would be different? Okay, this partnership with Southern Charm and this event would be really exciting. And then we'll expose them to our brand and how they're actually, whether they knew it or not, they're helping
Yeah.
our brand and they're helping what we're doing. So you sort of reversed it and met them where they were rather than kind of starting with you. Is that kind of the lesson? I mean, is that a good way of saying it?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking
Yeah.
how others might be able to adapt in different industries.
Absolutely. And honestly, I'm petrified that this is going to take off, and now there's going to be 10 of these in my local area, because that's what charities
Others
tend
will
to do.
copy.
But yeah, I just think that like if you can like take your ego and your branding off of your charity for a moment
Yep.
and do something that is fun for the community that people are always going to remember, but you raise a ton of money in the process of it, then like that was a huge win. So I
Yeah.
know that we talked about my husband telling me, would you rather raise $100,000 and have everyone in the room know who ISF is, or would you rather raise $1 million and have 10 people know who ISF is? And I was like, $1 million. And he was like, then do it. Who cares if
Yeah.
they leave there and they know who ISF is? But the money that you raise that night would exceed anything that you would have done that would have like individually spoke to every single gala attendee. And it's
Well,
just, it's so right. Now they will remember us for sure. And we'll be following up and make sure that they remember us. But the idea to get them there and take our brand off the table for a minute has just been a game changer for us. It makes me rethink every single event that we do. Like, why would we ever do galas or golf tournaments again? Let's do something completely different.
yeah. People are hungry for that. And
Yes.
as you kind of talk about reinvention and give that as an example, I also want to ask you, fertility preservation isn't a topic that, everyone would associate with pediatric cancer. Yet it's the focus of, is it that particular event that you were describing?
It is. It is.
And so, maybe you could talk about that, because that's another type of reinvention. Why that issue? How did you choose sort of where to focus your foundation's influence as you continue to reinvent to meet the moment?
Yeah, so when we thought about this event and just started thinking outside the box, you can have events all the time that raise money for research or family services or things like that. But when we reached out to the Charleston Hospital, which is where we were hoping to expand next, we talked with them about like, what are the types of programs that you guys wish that you had but can't get funding for? We talk again about like these small grassroots or the big box, like what's falling in the middle that we could help with. And one of the things they talked about was fertility preservation. So right now, I'm sure as many know, the chemo treatments that these kids receive when we were first diagnosed and they come in with their binder of here's all of the side effects, you see things like hearing loss, possible second cancers, heart disease. But when they said the possible inability to have children, that one got me, and it got me good. I was like, oh my gosh, like she's 2.5 years old, and you're telling me right now that she may not be able to have a baby if she survives at the age of
Mhm.
25. Like that is heartbreaking. So I love the idea that we're gonna be able to provide this service because right now it's not covered by insurance. So for kids ages 12 to 22, if they've gone through puberty, we would have the ability when they find out that they have cancer to stop treatment for 2 weeks, which is not detrimental to the life of the child, and ask them if they would like to preserve their fertility in those 2 weeks, so that and then just put that on hold. So we also pay for the freezing of the eggs or the sperm, and just know that that's already taken care of. We're taking something off the
Yeah.
plate for somebody. So, there's a process in determining it. It would determine, what type of chemo treatments you're getting to see if it is gonna be something that's gonna be affected. But I think that, it's around $15,000 for a girl to have it done and around 2,500 for a little boy. So just being able to provide that, in our local Charlotte hospitals as well as Charleston, I just think that that is something when we think about the audience of people that are gonna be at a Southern Charm event, it's 40-year-old moms that are gonna be there, and what would
Mhm.
speak to them? How could I potentially help someone be a mom one day? It just made total sense.
Well, it's a great example of where a nonprofit in the middle can
Mhm.
be, I think messy middle, you call it, can be really impactful, right? Because it's
Yeah.
maybe not the type of issue that would be like this giant national thing. If you just are doing your bake sale, it's probably not enough where you can make an impact because of the cost. But being in the middle, you can address that issue. And I think that's such an interesting theme too, because you're also talking about who's my target audience, and it's kind of folks whose age is in the middle and they kind of
Yes.
resonate with that. So
Very
there's sort
true.
of this theme around there. Um, I know that many people probably come to you when they're dealing with grief, particularly after losing a child, and often they have the idea of starting, their own foundation. Now that you've been through all this, what do you tell them?
It is such an unbelievably hard question for me because if I had gone in back and done it all over again, knowing where we would be, I would have done it. But I think that this is maybe a very rare case. I think they say that founder-led organizations usually last between 5 to 7 years. And really try to talk with the parent because I understand the pain and just the horrible taste of death when it happens, and you wanna do something immediately. So, usually when I talk with them, I usually say, "Take a little bit of time first," because I think anything that you do after the death of a child feels erratic later. I know for myself included. But, you know, I also tell them, "Keep in mind, this is something that now you're going to be known for the rest of your life. That's something your children are gonna be known for the rest of their life." So, it's hard, even nowadays, just going out and having dinner and meeting somebody, they're like, "What do you do?" And my husband's like, "Here it comes." And I'm like, "Well, I run the Isabella Santos Foundation." They're like, "Oh my gosh, I know exactly who you are. I've been following your story." And it's like, do you wanna have that the rest of your life, that a conversation starter is always about the death of a child, and it's a hard thing to put on a parent, it's a hard thing to put on the siblings that, that are still here, so it's just a tough thing, so I always tell them, "Take a little bit of time first," and also, I think the market is super flooded right now with a lot of these organizations because I understand that you don't want your child's name to be gone. I mean, I one of the best things about this foundation is that I'm able to talk about my daughter every day, like, people are still saying her name, and I understand that by not having that, it's like the child dies all over again. So I understand why people do it, but I think that there's a lot of great organizations out there that already have legs underneath them. I think of what we used to donate to in the beginning, and I'm like, well, that wasn't really the smartest place to do that. But now we've kind of figured out how to give in a smart way, make sure that doctors help guide us into what ideas are good and what ideas are bad. Because when you read an LOI from a doctor, they all sound amazing, right? But we have figured out how to have people guide us into like, "Oh, no, no, this is a real idea." So I
Yeah.
think that there's always an organization out there that's doing what you want to do, maybe a little bit better, to join forces with them initially, and then decide after a little bit of time has passed if this is something that you wanna relive every day because I have to tell the story of a 7-year-old little girl dying a lot, and that's really,
Yeah.
really hard. So I think people just always should just kinda pump the brakes a little bit and get involved early and then think about it. So, But I think
Yeah.
people are always so willing to jump, and all that does is just flood the market with somebody that's doing the exact same thing that I'm doing, which kind of counteracts the
Mhm.
productivity of your foundation.
Well, it's such smart advice. At the beginning, if you can take a beat and find
Mhm.
someone else that might do something closely aligned and find a way to support them, you know, you might find that's the place you want to be. You might learn something from that experience, or you may realize actually there's a gap that I want to fill, but now you've taken some time and you can really uh, have intention with it
Yeah.
and then just do something you know,
Yes.
as a reaction.
Mhm.
Um, I want to just, as we close, this has been such a great conversation. I want to end with just maybe a reflection for you as you think about influence and what it means to you. I mean, you've gone from, starting with this just what you thought was going to be a one-time fundraiser to really building this organization where now you're expanding your influence through partnerships across multiple states and different coalitions. What does influence mean to you today, and how has that changed since you started this journey?
Yeah, I think that, I thought about that question a lot, and I think that for me, um, influence is about leaving a legacy. So I think that through what I've gone through, I can educate people about what life is like with a rare cancer or what the process might entail. But I think that the important thing is to leave a lasting legacy and to influence people in a way that I'm leaving the world a better place than when I started. So, I think that, they always say with great power comes great responsibility,
Mm.
right? Is that Spider-Man?
Yeah.
But I definitely believe that. I mean, I think of people in my donor base that they never would have known anything about rare cancers had I not used my influence to teach them. And now they become advocates for us in the community. So I just think it's just such um, a telephone game of me telling a story, then they're at a dinner and then they tell the story. So I just think of like my influence of other people to make other people advocates for this and to just leave a legacy forever. Hopefully Isabella will be known forever, not myself. And I think that that's such a cool thing to have influence for.
I love that. As we think about the story that you shared with us today, Erin, which is so powerful, um, I mean, what you sort of ended with there about that legacy and those conversations, it reminds me of a lesson we had from another chief influencer. We talked about how all politics is local and perhaps all influence is local too, right? Those conversations,
Yes.
the dinner party and in your communities, they just make such a lasting impact. And
Hmm.
when I think about you and what you've done by creating and growing the Isabella Santos Foundation, like I said before, too many families have to go through various hardships. Some of them say, "Hey, I'm going to do something," and maybe they put a team together, or they have an idea, or they do a one-time thing. Very few create something like like you've done, and have kept it growing and evolved it and allowed it to reinvent itself to meet the moment that the way you're doing. And so when we think about that, it's like, well, what's the secret to that influence? And a few things that really jumped out at me in this conversation that I think many leaders of any stripe could take something away from are first, the power of authenticity. Even if it's a little crass, being real, your real emotions, you're angry, you're frustrated, because others are going to resonate with that type of emotion, because if you're feeling it, there are others who are feeling it too, and you can find that connection. And so being willing to do that, I think that's something that we sort of heard, that maybe it's a little easier to do that when you're in the messy middle. You're not, so big and bureaucratic that that's difficult. And on the other hand, you're big enough that you can make some impact beyond, just the one-time grassroots fundraiser.
Yeah.
Um, we
I would
hear
agree with that. I kind of fall into a space where I don't have a marketing or PR girl slapping my hand every time I speak, and that makes it a little bit easier to be authentic these days for sure.
yeah,
So they kind of let me be me, which is nice.
Yeah, there's something freeing about that and something powerful about that when it comes to influencing others.
Mhm.
And we talked a lot about that sort of messy middle. In the economy, a lot of people say, look, it's the middle market that's often overlooked. It's not always new hiring doesn't always come from the Fortune 500, but it doesn't actually come from the one person business. It's those mid market businesses and in management, they say, well, yeah, executives are important and people on the front line, but those middle managers have the toughest job of all. They're the ones that run the organizations. And it's
Very
making
true.
me think, if in the nonprofit world, maybe we could say the same for those of us who are in our 40s and middle age, we're making things work in the world too. But when it comes to nonprofits, I think you've made a really strong case that while these national nonprofit brands or global brands are so important, let's not forget the community-based nonprofits. And that's kind of was my other takeaway I wanted to close with, was just this idea of putting community at the center. It's a theme I've been hearing a lot in various different contexts. And when I hear about what you've done and the success, I think building community, making this about community. And it started as a community with you and Isabella as the nucleus. But then as you brought other young people and their families in, other diseases that were different from the disease that she was stricken with, you have allowed the influence to expand through that community where you're reaching thousands and more people who, don't always know you personally, although you certainly have many of those personal relationships. So I guess I'll say in closing, for me, authenticity and community are two of the really important themes. And you've really convinced me that we need to look at the middle. And I'm excited that we had the opportunity to feature the important that your work that you're doing in the Carolinas, because that regional and local impact, there's so much that we can learn from it. There's a huge impact you're making, to the point that you're even, the number one donor to the hospital in that case, which I think is really powerful. So thank you for sharing your story with us and, being vulnerable, being willing to talk about this, share your lessons of influence. I think there were so many wonderful takeaways, and we just really appreciate you taking time to share them with us today.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate it. Anytime we can have a little bit of a spotlight, it's so great, and it helps spread the message that we're getting out there. So thank you so
I think a
much.
lot of folks will be paying attention. I hope they look up the Isabella Santos Foundation and look you up, Erin, so that they can follow along with what you're doing. And some cool events coming up that are worth people paying attention to.
Definitely.
Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver. We help clients transform complexity into clarity with people-centered strategies. Whether you're looking to elevate the influence of your brand or of your leaders, check out socialdriver.com to learn more. For show notes or to nominate a guest, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn.